My name is Olivia, and for most of my life, I lived in the shadows of one simple word, yes. Yes to my daughter's requests. Yes to sacrifices that tore holes in my own dreams. Yes, even when my heart whispered no. You see, when Vanessa was born, she was my miracle. I still remember the first time I held her in my arms. So small, so perfect, so full of promise. Peter, my husband, stood beside me in the hospital room, his rough hands trembling as he touched her tiny fingers. We both swore we would give her the world, no matter what it cost us. And so we began to say yes. When Vanessa was 7, she begged to go to an expensive summer camp. Peter and I didn't have the money, but she looked at me with those wide brown eyes, tears already forming, whispering, "Please, Mom, everyone else is going." So I sold my grandmother's wedding ring, the only heirloom I had left from my family. I told myself it was just a piece of metal, but deep down, I felt like I had traded my past for Vanessa's smile. When she turned 12, she wanted ballet lessons. We couldn't afford the studio, but Peter picked up double shifts at the factory, and I started cleaning offices on weekends. I remember standing in that cold, empty office at night, scrubbing floors, thinking, if this makes her happy, then it's worth it. But each yes made the next one easier to demand. By high school, Vanessa wasn't asking anymore. She was expecting. A new phone because her friends had won. Brand-name clothes because she couldn't be seen in cheap things. We never went on vacations. We patched the same old couch in the living room. Peter's back ached from overtime, and I sometimes skipped meals so there'd be enough for the bills. Still, when Vanessa asked, the answer was always yes. Then came college. She dreamed of a private university. The tuition was staggering, but she told us, "Don't you want me to have a better life than you?" Those words cut deep, so we cashed in our savings bonds, dipped into the little we had put aside for retirement, and sent her off with proud smiles, hiding our fear of debt behind our applause. I thought maybe, just maybe, she would be grateful. But gratitude never came. When Vanessa met Sebastian, everything changed again. He was charming at first glance, tall, polished, with a smile that seemed rehearsed. Something in his eyes made me uneasy, but Vanessa was in love, and once more I said yes. We paid for their extravagant wedding. The flowers alone cost more than my entire yearly salary. Then came the honeymoon, 2 weeks in Paris, funded by Peter's retirement account. I remember him sitting quietly at the kitchen table, his hands trembling as he signed the withdrawal slip. He didn't say much, but I could see it in his eyes. A piece of him was breaking. But still, we told ourselves it's for Vanessa. She deserves it. After the wedding, the requests didn't stop. They grew bolder. A broken refrigerator, car repairs, rent money. Each time they promised, "We'll pay you back, Mom. Don't worry." But the money never returned. Then came the biggest blow, a $40,000 down payment for their house. Vanessa called me in tears, saying, "Mom, without this, we'll lose the house. Do you really want your granddaughter growing up without a home?" I remember sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the checkbook, my hands shaking as I wrote those numbers. $40,000. It was everything Peter and I had saved, raided from our retirement, with heavy penalties. That night, Peter sat in his recliner, silent. When I tried to talk to him, he just shook his head. Finally, he whispered, "Liv, when is enough enough?" I didn't answer, because deep down I didn't know. Every yes had chained me tighter, every sacrifice carving away pieces of myself until there was nothing left but fear of losing my daughter's love. And yet, even as resentment flickered in my heart, I buried it. I told myself, this is what mothers do. We give, we sacrifice, We endure. I didn't know then that all my yes were only paving the road to my own destruction. Because saying yes to Vanessa and Sebastian wasn't giving them love. It was giving them power. And one day, that power would bring me to the cold, suffocating moment inside a bank where my daughter would try to take the very last piece of me I had left. But that is a story for another chapter. After years of sacrifice, life began to feel heavier, and then came Peter's illness. My husband was never a man who complained. He carried weight in silence, whether it was the long factory shifts, the bills stacking on the counter, or the quiet ache of watching our daughter drift further into entitlement. But when the doctor said diabetes complications, his silence broke into groans, sleepless nights, and endless hospital visits. I became his nurse. I sat by his bed through the nights, checked his blood sugar, made him meals he could barely eat. My body was tired, but my heart was breaking more. Watching the man who had carried our family slowly wither was like watching the walls of a house crack one by one, knowing one day they would collapse. And they did. Peter passed away on a rainy Tuesday morning. The house felt like a tomb after that. Empty chair at the table, empty bed beside me, empty air where his laughter used to be. The only thing he left me was his life insurance, $80,000. A number that looked large on paper, but in truth, it was nothing compared to the years we had lost together. I told myself this money would be my safety net, something to keep me afloat as I figured out how to live alone. But Vanessa and Sebastian, they saw it differently. The first week after the funeral, they were kind, gentle even. Bringing food, checking in, holding Caroline's tiny hand to my chest so I wouldn't feel so alone. I wanted to believe they were just grieving with me. But grief doesn't last long when money is in the air. "Mom," Vanessa said one evening, her voice soft but rehearsed. Sebastian lost his job again. "We're behind on bills. Just until he finds something new, could you help?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to cling to that money like the life raft it was meant to be. But then she added, "Think of Caroline. She shouldn't suffer because of this." So I wrote the check. One check turned into another. 40,000 gone in a blur. My hands trembled every time I signed my name, like I was erasing my future with every stroke of the pen. Sebastian would shake my hand and say, "Thank you, Olivia. You're saving us." But his eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, never matched his words. The guilt was my jailer. Every time I thought of saying no, Vanessa would remind me of everything I had already given her. "You always said you wanted me to have more than you ever did. Don't stop now, Mom. Please." And when her words didn't work, she used her daughter. Caroline, my sweet granddaughter with ribbons in her hair and innocence in her smile, would suddenly need a new ballet costume or money for piano lessons or a school trip. The requests always came through Vanessa's mouth, but the weapon was always the child's name. "Don't you want Caroline to shine, Mom? How could I say no?" So I gave and gave, even when my own cupboards were bare. I remember one winter, my heater broke. I wrapped myself in 3 sweaters and boiled water on the stove for warmth, but when Vanessa called, crying about her car repairs, I gave her the money. Each yes felt like swallowing poison. But the fear of being a bad mother was worse than the poison itself, and so I kept silent, drowning in guilt, until the day came when the silence shattered. Sebastian had lost another job. Vanessa's voice was sharper this time, less pleading, more demanding. "Mom, we need the rest of the money. All of it. We can't keep living like this. You'll still have Social Security. You don't really need it the way we do. The rest of it. The last of what Peter left me." I felt my chest tighten, as if invisible hands were closing around my lungs. I tried to stall, tried to say, "Maybe next month." But Vanessa's eyes hardened, and Sebastian's hand clamped around mine. "Now, Olivia, you'll come with us to the bank. It'll just be a routine transfer." Routine transfer. That's what they called it. But I knew. Deep in my bones, I knew. This was theft, and I was about to hand them the key to my survival. That's how I ended up in that bank chair, trapped between my daughter's sweet poison and my son-in-law's crushing grip. My body frozen, my heart screaming. And that is where my story truly began to change. Because in that moment of despair, I found something I hadn't felt in years. A spark. The spark of no. And it would come alive in the most unexpected way, with a note, a stranger's kindness, and the courage I never knew I had. The pen trembled in my hand as I sat at the counter of the bank. Vanessa's voice purred beside me, sugar-coated poison. "Just sign it, Mom. It's just a transfer, nothing complicated." But Sebastian's grip on my arm told the truth. His fingers pressed into my skin like steel claws. I could feel the bruises forming, my bones aching under his control. The room around us carried on in perfect normalcy. Customers filled out forms. A child tugged at her mother's sleeve, pen scratched on paper, footsteps echoed on the polished tiles. Nobody knew I was being robbed not with a weapon, but with love twisted into a chain. And then Mr. Thompson appeared, the bank manager, a kind-faced man with graying hair and eyes that noticed everything. He smiled politely, but when his gaze fell on me, it lingered. Maybe he saw the fear in my eyes. Maybe he noticed the way Sebastian held me too tightly. That's when I did it. My only act of rebellion after decades of surrender. With shaking fingers, I scribbled a note on the back of a deposit slip. "Help me. They're forcing me." I slid it across the counter, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. Mr. Thompson glanced down, then back up at me. His expression didn't change, but I saw it, the flicker of understanding. He nodded slightly as if to say, "I hear you." Within moments, he excused us politely and asked us to step into his office to finalize some paperwork. Vanessa smiled, thinking her plan was working. Sebastian loosened his grip slightly, believing victory was near. But the moment the door closed behind us, Mr. Thompson's voice changed. Firm, gentle, protective. "Olivia," he said, looking directly at me, "you don't have to do this." Something inside me cracked wide open. For the first time in years, someone was telling me I had a choice. Tears spilled down my cheeks as I whispered everything. The years of demands, the endless guilt, the money that vanished, the fear of losing my daughter's love. Mr. Thompson listened without judgment. When I finished, he leaned forward and said words that pierced through my chains. "This is not love. This is abuse, elder abuse, financial coercion, and you do not have to give them another penny. Abuse." The word rang in my ears. I had always thought abuse was bruises, shouting, fists. But he was right. What Vanessa and Sebastian had done was just as violent, only their weapons were guilt, manipulation, and my own love for them. Mr. Thompson promised to protect me. He flagged my accounts, blocked unauthorized access, and gave me information for legal help and support groups. For the first time in decades, I felt the faintest glimmer of power. And then came the moment of truth. We stepped back into the waiting area. Vanessa was scrolling on her phone, Sebastian checking his watch impatiently. When they saw me, Vanessa turned on her performance. "Mom, what took so long? You're scaring me. Just sign the papers so we can leave, okay?" Her eyes shimmered with fake tears. But this time, I did not bend. No. The word was small. My voice cracked. But it was mine. Vanessa blinked, as if she didn't understand. "What?" I stood taller, gripping my purse like a shield. "I said no. I'm not giving you the money. Not today. Not ever. For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air. Then Sebastian leaned close, his voice low and venomous. You'll regret this, Olivia. Don't forget who takes care of you when you're old. Before I could answer, Mr. Thompson motioned to security. 2 guards appeared, firm but professional, and escorted Vanessa and Sebastian out of the bank. Vanessa screamed, tears streaming down her face, calling me ungrateful, heartless, a terrible mother. But I didn't move. I didn't flinch. For the first time in years, I had said no. And though my knees shook and my chest felt hollow, I knew something had shifted inside me forever. The days that followed were not easy. Vanessa unleashed a storm of calls, texts, and voicemails. You've abandoned us. After everything I did for you, this is how you repay me? Fine. When we're gone, don't come crying. Some messages came from Sebastian, colder, sharper. You'll die alone. No one will protect you when you're helpless. And then came the cruelest blow. They brought Caroline, my granddaughter, to my doorstep. Vanessa pushed her forward like a pawn in a chess game. Go on, sweetie, she whispered. And Caroline, with her innocent eyes, said, Grandma, Mommy says you don't love me anymore. Can you please help? I need a new dress for my recital. I broke. Tears streamed down my face as I hugged her, holding her small body against mine. But I looked at Vanessa and saw the truth. It wasn't Caroline asking. It was Vanessa's manipulation, poisoning even her child. That night, I sat alone and felt like a shell of myself. Even my sister Clara, when I confided in her, shook her head and said, Olivia, maybe you're overreacting. Vanessa is just struggling. Don't be so hard on her. Her words cut deep. Was I truly paranoid? Was I cruel? The doubt clawed at me, until an unexpected visitor arrived. My great-niece, also named Caroline, a young woman with fire in her eyes. She sat at my table and told me her own story, how her mother had bled her dry, using the same tricks of guilt and fear. And Olivia, she said firmly, this is abuse. And you're not alone. Come with me. Let me show you there's a way out. She took me to a support group for victims of financial abuse. Sitting in that circle, hearing story after story that mirrored my own, something in me finally clicked. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't cruel. And I wasn't alone. That night, for the first time in decades, I slept without nightmares. Because I knew one thing, the chains were breaking. Freedom doesn't come all at once. It comes in pieces, small, fragile victories that slowly add up until one day you realize the chains have fallen away. For me, freedom began with saying no at the bank. But true healing came in the days that followed. I started small. I went to painting classes at the community center. At first, my hands trembled as I held the brush, the canvas staring back at me like a stranger. But then, with each stroke of color, I felt a piece of myself returning, pieces I had buried under decades of sacrifice. I began volunteering at a women's shelter. I listened to women whose stories mirrored mine, wives who had been drained of their savings, mothers who had given until they had nothing left. Together, we cried, we laughed, and we built each other back up. And then came the boldest step of all. I booked a solo trip to Tuscany. 4 years, Peter and I had dreamed of traveling to Italy. We had imagined sipping wine under the golden sun, walking through vineyards, watching the rolling hills fade into twilight. But we always put it off. There was always tuition to pay, bills to cover, Vanessa's endless demands. Now, for the first time in my life, I used my money for me. I remember standing on a hilltop in Tuscany, the sky painted in hues of gold and lavender, a glass of wine in my hand. The air was warm, and for the first time in decades I felt light. I wasn't someone's provider, someone's safety net, someone's last resort. I was just Olivia, and that was enough. Of course, Vanessa and Sebastian didn't disappear. They tried again. They stormed into the bank, demanding access to a forgotten joint account I had once opened with Vanessa when she was young. But Mr. Thompson had anticipated this. He flagged it, froze it, and called me immediately. "They won't get through me," he assured. And they didn't. Each failed attempt only proved one thing. Their power over me was gone. 2 years passed. I sold the old house. It was too full of ghosts and memories, and bought a small cottage near the coast. Quiet, peaceful, filled with sunlight and the scent of salt from the sea. It wasn't grand, but it was mine. One afternoon, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, I froze. Caroline, my granddaughter. But she wasn't a little girl anymore. She was a teenager now, her eyes no longer innocent but searching, questioning. She stepped inside, clutching a worn backpack. "Grandma," she whispered, "I found your letters." My heart stopped. "What letters?" She pulled out a bundle, letters I had written but never sent. Letters where I had poured out my heart, confessing the truth of her parents' manipulation, my fears, my guilt, my love for her. "I read them," she said softly, "and I believe you. I know Mom and Dad used you. I heard their fights. I saw how they treated you. I don't want to be like them." Tears filled my eyes as she reached for my hand. "Grandma," she whispered, her voice breaking, "I don't want money. I just want you." I held her close, my body shaking with sobs. For so long, I thought I had lost her, that my granddaughter would grow up poisoned by her parents' lies. But here she was, choosing love over manipulation, truth over deceit. In that moment, I knew the cycle was broken. Now, at 68 years old, I live with peace. I rise with the sun, paint in the mornings, walk by the sea in the afternoons. Sometimes I visit Tuscany again just because I can. And when Caroline visits, we sit by the fireplace, drinking hot cocoa, laughing, talking about everything and nothing. She reminds me that love, real love, isn't about money or sacrifice or guilt. It's about freedom. It's about choice. For the first time in my life, I finally understand this truth. I spent decades saying yes to everyone else, but it was only when I learned to say no that I discovered the power of saying yes to myself. And that has made all the difference.